Hi YouTube and hi Side Peeps! Welcome to our last of Chapter 8, the organization of knowledge and the mind. So I will be discussing a summary and application in one recent research study. So to sum it all up, if you have viewed other videos before this, number 1, how are representations of words and symbols organized in the mind? The fundamental unit of symbolic knowledge is the concept. Concepts may be organized into categories, which may include other categories. They may be organized into schemas, which may include other schemas. They also may vary in application and in abstractness. Finally, they may include information about relationships between concepts, attributes, contexts, and general knowledge and information about causal relationships. There are different general theories of categorization. They include feature-based definitional categories, prototype-based categories, and exemplar-based approaches. One of those forms for schemas is the script, an alternative model for knowledge organization is a semantic network involving a web of labeled relations between conceptual nodes. An early network model, based on the notion of cognitive economy, was strictly hierarchical, but subsequent ones have tended to emphasize the frequency with which particular associations are used. Number 2. How do we represent other forms of knowledge in the mind? Many cognitive psychologists have developed models for procedural knowledge. These are based on computer simulations of such representations. An example of such a model is the production system. And you'll get that if you have viewed the other videos before this. Number 3. How does declarative knowledge interact with procedural knowledge? An important model in cognitive psychology is ACT, as well as its updated revision, ACTR. It represents both procedural knowledge in the form of production system and declarative knowledge in the form of a semantic network. In each of these models, the metaphor for understanding both knowledge, representation, and information processing is based on the way in which a computer processes information. For example, these models underscore the serial processing of information. Research on how the human brain processes information has shown that brains, unlike computers, use parallel processing of information. In addition, it appears that much of information processing is not localized only to particular areas of the brain. Instead, it is distributed across various regions of the brain all at once. A model for human knowledge representation and information processing based on what we know about the brain is the parallel distributed processing, or PDP model. It is also called a connectionist model. In such models, it is held that neuron-like units may be excited or inhibited by the actions of other units, or they may be inactive. Further, knowledge is represented in terms of patterns, or excitations or inhibition strengths, rather than in particular units. Most PDP models also explain the priming effect by suggesting the mechanisms of spreading activation. So let's go to application and research studies. So in application, process the material semantically. Knowledge is organized semantically. Therefore, knowledge acquisition is optimized when the learner focuses on the meaning of the new material. That is by Fergus, Craig, and Endel Tulving were among the first to provide evidence for the importance of semantic processing. 2. Process and retrieve information frequently. A second learning principle is to test and retrieve the information numerous times. Retrieving or self-producing information can be contrasted with simply reading or copying it. Decades of research on a phenomenon called the generation effect have shown that passively studying items by copying or reading them does little for memory in comparison to self-producing or generating an item. 3. Learning and retrieval conditions should be similar. How knowledge is represented is determined by the conditions and context, internal and external, in which it is learned, and this in turn determines how it is retrieved. Information is best retrieved when the conditions of learning and retrieval are the same. This principle has been referred to as an encoding specificity. Connect new information to prior knowledge. Now, knowledge is interconnected. Therefore, new material that is linked to prior knowledge will be better retained. A driving factor in text and discourse comprehension is prior knowledge. Skilled readers actively use their prior knowledge during comprehension. Prior knowledge helps the reader to fill in the contextual gaps within the text and develops a better global understanding or situations model of the text. And lastly, create a cognitive procedures. Procedural knowledge is better retained and more easily accessed. Therefore, one should develop and use cognitive procedures when learning information. Procedures can include shortcuts for completing a task, and that is tends to solve multiplication problems, as well as memory strategies that increase the distinctive meaning of information. Cognitive research has repeatedly demonstrated the benefits of memory strategies, or mnemonics, for enhancing the recall of information. Now, this is one of I've researched about the recent study of Chapter 8. This was written by J.C. Spender by Kosminski University. He titled his research theory of organizational knowledge, learning, and memory, 3 concepts in search of theory. So this is his abstract and figures. So it focuses on the distinction between the explicit and implicit types of knowledge. Discussion of fragmentation and the positivist theory details on the epistemological model developed for representing several types of knowledge. Conclusions, abstract from author. There is much interest in organizational knowledge following the recognition of the strategic place in interfirm competition. but there is no adequate theory of such knowledge, or if its acquisition, storage, and application. That was Penrose's 1959 theory of the growth of the firm, Nelson and Pinter's 1982 evolutionary economics, and the Gestrel's notions of discontinuous perceptual change taken from Levin 1935 still define the cutting edge of the learning and knowledge-based approaches to the firm. Compared with these field-shaping works, the recent literature on organizational knowledge, learning, and memory seems inconclusive. Takes a new start from the Jamnesian dissective between knowing what and knowing how, and the Durkheimian distinction between individual and social forms of knowledge. The resulting pluralistic organization epistemology implies a dynamic theory of the firm as dialectical systems of knowledge processes. So this is his abstract and figures of his research. And that would be the end of chapter 8. Thank you for watching. See you next time.